My name is Colby Sharp. I am a fifth grade teacher in Michigan, and I want you to let me know down in the comments below, what is a book that you have never read aloud to kids that you are dying to read aloud to them, that you would love to read aloud to them, but for whatever reason you just haven't yet? Because that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 books that I cannot wait to share with kids. Are you ready? Let's go. Recently I made a video where I shared 5 of my favorite books to read aloud to kids, and I will link that video in like one of those cards at the top here, and I'll also put it down in the description below so you can see some of my favorite books to read aloud. And when I was making that video, I walked around my classroom library and I was picking out all of the books that I have loved reading aloud to kids and trying to decide which ones to include in the video. And what I kept finding, there were so many books in my classroom library that I wanted to read aloud, but for whatever reason, I just had never had the chance to read aloud. And so I've been thinking about those books all week. I thought it would be fun to maybe start another series where I share books that I'm dying to read aloud to kids. And that's what we're gonna do today. So today I'm gonna share with you 5 books that I'm dying to read aloud to children. And the first one is a classic. It's a Newbery Honor-winning book. It is The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. Not only do I want to read this book aloud to kids, I've only read this book once, and it was like 8 or 9 years ago. I know the book is about to turn 25 years old. I've only read it once, and I remember it being great. But what I also remember and what I know is that so many people have read this book aloud to kids and talk about how amazing of a read aloud it is. And I've never read it aloud to kids. I've read Bud Not Buddy aloud to kids, and that is a home run. But I've never read The Watsons Go to Birmingham aloud to kids. So this is a book that I am dying to read aloud. If you've read this book aloud, let me know down in the comments what you think about it and if it works or if it doesn't work as a read aloud. Number 2, Lynn Kelly's Song for a Whale. This book is amazing, and I'm actually pretty good at book talking this book to students. And in the past year, like last year, I got so many kids to read it through this book talk that I gave, and then they book talked it to other kids. It just became like really popular in my class. So many kids had read it, so I hadn't actually had the reason to read aloud because so many of my kids had already read it. So I could probably just book talk it and like hit another home run book talk out with this book, this beautiful story of this girl who wants to be heard and realizes that there's a whale out there that can't be heard. I don't want to get too much into the book talk here because then I definitely will go book talk it to my kids before the day is over, and then I won't read it aloud. So Song for a Whale is an absolute beautiful story. It takes you on a journey, and I love going on a journey in a book and like trying to find something and solve something and figure something out and get to the end. Song for a Whale. It's so good. You've probably read it because it's awesome, and hopefully everyone's read it. But if you haven't, you should read this book. And then read it aloud, and then tell me that I should read it aloud. Confirm what I think, that it would be such a good read aloud. It's so good. Such a good book. Oh, I miss it. I haven't had any kids read it yet this year. I haven't book talked it, which is probably why. So book talk it, read it aloud. Oh, it's so hard. All right, book 3. Graceland's Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. So sometimes I get intimidated by long read alouds. This book is just such an incredible story. It's such a masterpiece. I don't know why I haven't read it aloud. I think it's the length. Sometimes that intimidates me. I have heard from a lot of educators who have read this beautiful Newbery Honor-winning book by Graceland Aloud, and they've had tremendous success. And it's also the first book in like a 3-book companion trilogy of awesomeness, and I know that if I read this and it was the home run that I think it would be as a read aloud, I'm sure that I could get kids to read the other books by Grace. And this is actually, of all of the books that I own, this is actually my favorite physical copy of any book that I own. Like this book, this actual one. And it's because this book was actually a gift from a student about 8 years ago. She was a student who came to Battle Creek Lakeview when I taught at Mingus Brook Elementary. She was just there 1 year, and she was a reader, I was a reader. She actually wrote me this letter And it says, where the mountain meets the moon, where the ocean meets the sun, where I meet you is where we read. Seriously. I'm not really like a possession, like sentimental collector person, but this one is special to me. I love this book. I miss that girl. I wonder how she's doing. She's graduated from high school now. It's crazy. Oh. All right, next up, Wild Robot, Peter Brown. I've never read this aloud. I've loved this book. I've had tons of kids reading it. And I teach 5th grade, and the 4th grade teachers read it aloud, so there's really no way that I'm going to be able to read it aloud unless I like went to 3rd grade and then undercut them. That probably would be frowned upon. This is such a wild ride. Such a great book. And then like you read this book and like pretty much everyone's going to want to read the second one. Everyone's going to want to know what happens to Roz and how things go. This is the book right here that I would have loved more than anything. This would have been my favorite. This might have been of all of the books that I've read over the years, this is the one of maybe 2 or 3 that would have been my favorite as a kid. Yeah, Hatchet was number 1, read aloud, that we did in 4th grade. This probably would have been my favorite book. I actually think that this book does some things that Hatchet didn't do for me that would have made this like book 1. Yeah. Someday I'll read this aloud. Someday. And finally, Allie Benjamin's The Next Great Polly Fink. I read this book last year and I just like couldn't get enough of it. I just had to talk about it with everyone. I wanted everyone to read it. There's this crazy surprise that I should have seen coming at the end of the book, and I'm so disappointed in myself as a reader that I didn't, but the whole time that part was happening towards the end, I just imagined what it would be like to be with a class that was so invested in this book, so in love with this book, so just like wrapped up in what was happening, and like to experience that moment with them. I live for those moments in books, those read aloud moments where everything comes together or their minds are blown, especially late in a book when they're so into it and so invested in the characters and the story. The Next Great Polly Fink. So these are 5 books that I've never read aloud to children that I'm dying to read aloud to children. Please let me know down in the comments below. What are some books that you're dying to read aloud to kids that you've never read aloud? Let me know what book, why you want to read it, maybe why you haven't read it. I don't know. I could just talk about read aloud all the time. So that's what I'm going to do. My name is Colby Sharp. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have an awesome-tastic day.